έκανε τους Αμερικανούς να στηρίξουν μαζικά τον Ντόναλντ Τραμπ? Πώς έφτασε η εργατική τάξη να εκφράζεται από τους Ρεπουμπλικάνους? Πόσο απειλείται η Ευρώπη από τη νέα κυβέρνηση των Ηνωμένων Πολιτειών? Μπορεί να αντιδράσει και πώς μπορεί να γίνει πιο αυτόνομη? Στα ερωτήματα αυτά απαντά ο παγκοσμίου φήμης καθηγητής οικονομικών Τζέφρι Σακς στη συνέντευξη που παραχώρησε στο euronews.
Mr. Sachs, thank you for this interview to Euronews Greek. We understand that the landslide victory of Donald Trump has been a surprise to many, mainly due to the fact that he managed to win what we call the popular vote. How can we explain that?
Well, if you look at the vote, he didn't win new votes, but Kamala Harris lost the votes that Biden had won in 2020. This is mainly a lack of support or enthusiasm for the Biden-Harris administration. In other words, our elections tend to be judgments. Is the incumbent doing a good job or not? That's the main question. It wasn't a landslide for Trump, but it was a lack of enthusiasm for Biden and Harris. And because of that lack of enthusiasm, Trump has won. He didn't win in a landslide. He won a clear victory, definitely, but not a landslide victory, and not with a huge enthusiasm across the country. He has his supporters, but the real lack of enthusiasm was for Biden and Harris.
We thought here in Europe that the American economy was doing great. I mean, it has been growing, and the markets are doing great, so why people aren't happy with it?
Yeah, the idea of what a great economy is depending on who you are. If you are a wealth holder, the stock market is very strong and you're in a lot of wealth. If you are a professional, the economy is quite good, thank you. If you are a working class worker in a rural area or a suburb or a factory town in the American Midwest, it doesn't feel good at all. Wages have been basically stagnant for many decades. Living standards have not increased. Even life expectancy has gone down for people with a high school or less education, while it's gone up for people with a university degree. So America for many, many years has been two different societies. Those who are professionals with an advanced degree, life is good. Those who have a high school degree, work on a factory line, or lost their job because the factory closed or it was converted to robots, don't feel so good. These are the two Americas. They don't talk to each other. The Democrats became the party of the professional class, whereas the Republicans, strangely, which used to be the party of only the richer part, Trump politically had the insight to represent the working class that was quite unhappy with the current situation. The Democrats lost their base over the last 10 years because they increasingly represented people with advanced university degrees. And you look at where the vote is. The vote for the Democrats is on the west coast of the United States, especially California, Oregon, and Washington State, or on the East Coast, especially New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, the New England states, and so on. And those are the professional areas. Those are the tech areas of the country. It's in the interior, in agriculture, in mining, in manufacturing, where the education levels on average are lower, where there's more of a blue-collar or working-class population. People don't feel so good. So even this division...
Do you believe these people will feel better once a trade war erupts against China, against Europe maybe, and tariffs bring prices even higher than they already are?
Absolutely not. So I don't see that Trump has anything on offer that's going to make his voters feel better. Again, Trump could give some tax cuts that maybe give a little bit of temporary stimulus, but I don't even believe that, by the way, because we already have a budget deficit that is 7% of gross domestic product. We already have a debt that is more than 100% of national income. So Trump can't even play the game of sprinkling unaffordable tax cuts around like he did the first term. So I don't believe that his strategy really meets the needs of working class people. But, you know, elections are not made on blackboards with economic theory and evidence. They're made with emotions and especially whether people are happy with the incumbent or not happy. They're not happy. I don't think they're going to be happy with Trump in 4 years.
Do you see actually Trump administration proceeding with all the tariffs he pledged to impose? Probably
yes, because Trump is, in his personal belief, a protectionist. He thinks that America has been hurt by trade with China. I think this is wrong. It is true that particular groups in America probably have been hurt, but on the whole, America has benefited from trade with China. Once he starts putting up tariff barriers and so forth, this will become more and more clear. Price of products will rise. Real wages will suffer. Americans won't be too happy.
Back to the States, as he promised. Do you see any factories coming back to the States as he promised?
There could be some factories coming, but not very many jobs with them. Remember, in our day, manufacturing does not create many jobs because the robots do the jobs. This has been going on for 40 years. Go into an automobile plant, and there are very few workers. And that's true in the United States. It's true in Japan. It's true in Europe. It's robots, robot arms that are on the assembly line. That has been the biggest change. That has been what has left the working class farther behind. Now, the ones that own the robots have made a fortune. The ones that own the capital have made a fortune. The profits have gone up, but the wages have gone down. And the wages of the working class have gone down. That's not going to change because of tariffs. That's going to continue to be a reality. The United States says, for other reasons, it wants to bring semiconductor manufacturing back. Well, that's more strategic, but still, there are almost no jobs in such factories. They're incredibly automated. There are huge capital expenditures for very, very few jobs. And when you look at the number of manufacturing jobs in the United States, they've been on a long-term decline. They went up a little bit recently, but from a much, much reduced level. And Trump and Biden had big tariffs. It didn't create a revival of manufacturing employment. It's not going to do so.
We understand that China has been preparing for the possibility of a new trade war with the U.S. Do you think Europe should do the same in the meantime until Trump takes office?
Well, I think that Europe should understand it's not going to have a smooth ride with Trump. I would have said to European leaders at any time, stop being so much following the United States. Europe followed the United States into war with Ukraine. You know, the dominant idea that the war in Ukraine came only from Russia is false. It came from the U.S. NATO enlargement. But European leaders would never say it. They said, well, we're with the U.S. This is the transatlantic alliance. I'm not saying to have hostility across the Atlantic, but Europe should follow its own course. For example, Europe should trade with China. Europe should be part of the Belt and Road Initiative. This is good for Europe, not bad for Europe. Europe shouldn't just have a trade war with China because the United States says so. And so this is something that Europe has to be careful about, which is it needs its own autonomy. Now, people talk about strategic autonomy in terms of defense, but also Europe needs its own economic autonomy as well, and not simply following what the United States says. And when Trump comes in
a globalized economy,
Of course, Europe is 450 million people in the European Union. It's a major market. It's a sophisticated place. It's got the highest living standards in the world, but it needs to get organized. Where are the tech leaders of Europe? They're in the United States, I'm sorry to say. The startups that Europe makes go to Silicon Valley to get large. This is not right. Mario Draghi's report gives a point to this, which is Europe needs its champions. Europe needs, it has its Airbus, but it needs more than Airbus. It needs tech champions. It needs to be able to compete with China and with the U.S. The German automotive industry fell terribly behind China on electric vehicles. You know, Volkswagen, Daimler-Benz, Mercedes said, oh, we'll go on. We produce great internal combustion engines, but the world needs electric vehicles, and China's taken over, strangely enough. Europe was the great automotive producers.
In this challenging environment, how do economies like Greece's, smaller economies, are impacted, do you think?
Well, first of all, every economy, no matter where, needs to have good relations with its neighbors. So Greece should be trading with the Eastern Mediterranean. It should have actually good economic relations with Turkey, as hard as that is sometimes. It should have good relations with the Middle East. It should have good relations with North Africa, because regional trade is a natural fact of life. And since Greece is a shipping giant also, Greece plays a big role in international trade, naturally speaking. So this is one point. Greece would benefit tremendously from an end of the war in Ukraine. Greece was a great destination for Russian investors and a great destination for Russian tourists and so forth. But this stops with the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is no good for Greece. It's no good for Europe. And this is why the whole idea of having this kind of conflict with Russia made no sense at all. And again, it was Europe following the United States hardliners.
Either Europe's decision, this war, neither Greece's, neither Ukraine's. It was the invasion of Russia that caused it. So
yeah, the war.
You cannot actually blame the European leadership.
No, what you can blame is NATO. For NATO trying to enlarge to Ukraine when Russia kept saying no, no, no. And
doesn't the country have the right to decide for itself if it wants to be a member of NATO?
Of course not. Not if it threatens the next door neighbor country. It's just not a good idea. In other words, Mexico does not have the right to say it will have Russian military bases. There's no right. That would threaten the United States. So there's no right to that. It makes no sense. It's not prudent. We have to be smart. We have to, the ancient Greeks had a word called phronesis, which meant practical wisdom. And countries need practical wisdom. And Ukraine should have been smart enough to know, don't join NATO. By the way, that's what President Yanukovych of Ukraine said. I want to be neutral. And the United States helped to overthrow him. So this is why we have conflict. We have to have practical judgment, good prudence. And this, I think, would help everybody, and it would really help Greece.
Do you see the war in Ukraine ending with a new administration?
Most likely. This is, I think, one area where Trump will say, I don't want 4 years of this burden. Ukraine will lose. It's expensive. My voters don't want to pour more tens or hundreds of billions of dollars into Ukraine. So I think President Trump will call President Putin and say, let's make a deal. I think the war will end soon.
Professor Sacks, thank you for your insight. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you. Appreciate it.